1:47 a.m., Gulf of Oman, 58 nautical miles southeast of Muscat. 6 Iranian anti-ship missiles just launched simultaneously from 2 coastal batteries on opposite sides of the same bay. Not probing shots, not harassment. 6 missiles, launched in the same 2-second window, from positions 17 kilometers apart, designed to arrive at the same target from 2 completely different directions at the same moment. The United States warship formation, USS Shiloh, a Ticonderoga-class cruiser, and USS Nitze, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, had less than 5 minutes before the first wave reached engagement range. The entire formation carried 211 sailors and 31 Marines. Every single second mattered. Welcome to Navy Powerline, where we break down the operations that define American naval power. What you are about to hear is a reconstruction based on real Iranian coastal missile battery doctrine, U.S. Navy Aegis system engagement protocols, and Fifth Fleet operational assessments of multi-axis Salvo attack profiles in the Gulf of Oman. The coordinated Salvo strike, multiple missiles from multiple positions arriving from different vectors at the same time, is one of the most technically demanding defensive challenges that an Aegis-equipped ship can face. It is also exactly what the IRGCN has been developing and rehearsing for in this theater for years. Understanding why the Salvo is so dangerous requires understanding what makes the Aegis system exceptional and what makes it finite. The AN/SPY one-phased array radar aboard a Ticonderoga or Arleigh Burke-class ship can track over 100 simultaneous targets. The Aegis combat system can manage multiple missile engagements in parallel. The Standard Missile 2 has a single-shot kill probability against a standard anti-ship missile that is very high when the geometry is favorable and the threat profile is in the library. But Aegis is not infinite. It has fire control channels, simultaneous engagement tracks that can be active at one moment. It has a magazine that can be depleted. It has a targeting computer that must build engagement solutions in sequence, even if it builds them very fast. And crucially, when multiple threats arrive from different bearings simultaneously, the radar must maintain separate track files on each, build separate fire control solutions for each, and queue separate SM-2 launches for each, all within a time window that the threat's flight time imposes. Against a single missile, the system is excellent. Against 6 missiles from 2 directions at once, plus whatever else the attacker decides to throw at the formation at the same moment, the margin for error narrows very fast, and Iran had decided to throw something else. At 1:47 a.m., as the 6 missiles lifted off their launchers on the Iranian and Omani-facing coastal positions, a P-3 Orion maritime patrol aircraft operating under IRGCN colors took off from an airfield southeast of Bandar Abbas and immediately began climbing on a bearing toward the formation. This was the coordination element. The aircraft was not carrying anti-ship weapons. It was carrying a targeting radar, a surface search system capable of providing real-time position updates on the American ships to the coastal batteries, and specifically designed to assess whether the initial salvo had achieved its objective or whether a follow-on strike was required. The aircraft was also creating an additional tracking demand on the Aegis system at the exact moment the missile engagement was beginning. The IRGCN had not designed the salvo and the aircraft approach together by accident. At 1:47:19 a.m., USS Shiloh's AN/SPY 1A radar had all 6 missile tracks classified as hostile. The automated combat system began building engagement solutions immediately. The Tactical Action Officer, Lieutenant Commander Daniel Park, reviewed the picture and authorized weapons free at 1:47:34. 15 seconds from launch detection to weapons free, the first SM-2 Block 3B left USS Shiloh's forward VLS at 1:47:44. Here is the engagement picture as Park saw it in that moment. 6 missiles in 2 groups of 3. The Western group, assessed as C-802, nor anti-ship missiles, subsonic, sea-skimming, radar-guided, was approaching from the northwest on a direct bearing at approximately 0.8 Mach. Engagement geometry was clean. SM-2 intercepts against NOR-class missiles in favorable geometry produce high kill probability. The Eastern group was different. The Eastern 3 missiles were supersonic. Their radar cross-sections were smaller than the NOR profile. Their flight path was lower, approximately 15 meters above the sea surface, which is at the lower boundary of the Aegis radar's reliable track altitude in sea state 3 wave conditions. and their specific radar signature did not produce a clean match against any entry in the Aegis threat library. The system flagged the Eastern Group contacts as unknown type, which required a manual classification override from the Tactical Action Officer before the engagement solution could be finalized for that group. Manual override takes 3 to 7 seconds under combat conditions. Park made the override call in 4 seconds, but those 4 seconds had compressed the engagement window for the Eastern Group by a margin that would matter. USS Shiloh's Aegis system assigned engagement responsibility as follows. Shiloh would engage all 3 Western Nor missiles, firing 2 SM-2s per target as per standard 2-shot doctrine. USS Nitze would engage the 3 Eastern supersonic threats, also 2 shots per target, 6 targets, 12 SM-2 launches total, both ships fully committed to the engagement sequence. The P-3 surveillance aircraft was now at Angels 12 and closing on the formation at 280 knots. It was not yet in weapons range of anything it might be carrying, but it was a track that both CICs were monitoring, which meant attention and cognitive bandwidth, being applied to a contact that could not be engaged under current ROE. The first SM-2 salvo against the Western Nor group went well. Shiloh's fire control computer had clean geometry, 3 Nor missiles, 3 pairs of SM-2, first intercepts at 22, 19, and 17 nautical miles. All 3 Western threats detonated cleanly before reaching the formation. The Eastern Group was a different engagement entirely. USS Nitze's first SM-2 against the lead Eastern contact launched at 1:48:07. The compressed timeline from the 4-second classification delay had reduced the intercept range for that first shot from a preferred 18 nautical miles down to approximately 12. Tighter geometry, smaller error tolerance. The SM-2 intercepted cleanly. Lead Eastern contact destroyed. Second Eastern contact, SM-2, launched at 1:48:11. Intercept at 10 nautical miles, clean. Third Eastern contact, and here the engagement reached its critical moment. The third Eastern missile had descended further during the engagement. It was now at approximately 9 meters above the sea surface. At 9 meters, the AN/SPY 1D radar aboard USS Nitze is operating against the target in a zone of significant sea return interference. The radar energy is partially reflected off the wave surfaces, creating a zone of degraded tracking quality at very low altitudes. The fire control solution for the third Eastern contact was marked as marginal. Marginal meant the SM-2 would guide with reduced confidence. Not no confidence, reduced. USS Nitze fired the SM-2 at 1:48:15. The missile guided on the track. It went out to the intercept point. The proximity fuse activated. It missed. Post-engagement telemetry analysis placed the closest approach distance at 14 meters. The fusing threshold required 4 meters for reliable fragment coverage at that target size. The SM-2 detonated its warhead in empty air 11 meters above and 15 meters behind the incoming missile. The Eastern supersonic missile was still inbound. Range, 9 nautical miles. Speed, approximately Mach 2.2. Time to USS Nitze, 25 seconds. This is the moment in the engagement that determines outcomes. The Phalanx CIWS aboard USS Nitze had been tracking the incoming contact as the SM-2 engagement developed. It was in automatic mode. When the SM-2 miss was confirmed by the fire control computer, the Phalanx system immediately took over as the terminal defense. But there was also a second SM-2 in the queue, the follow-on shot that standard doctrine called for. The tactical action officer aboard USS Nitze, Lieutenant Michelle Torres, had approximately 18 seconds to make one of the hardest calls in naval air defense. Standard doctrine said fire the second SM-2 immediately. But at 9 nautical miles, with the incoming missile at 9 meters altitude in degraded radar conditions, the same geometry problem that caused the first miss would affect the second shot. The probability of a second SM-2 engagement success at that range and altitude was being assessed by the fire control computer as significantly below standard. The Phalanx was already acquiring. Option A, fire the second SM-2 and trust it performs better than the marginal solution suggested, while the Phalanx stands by as backup. Option B, hold the SM-2 and trust the Phalanx as the primary terminal defense, preserving the SM-2 for any follow-on threats. Option C, fire both the SM-2 and confirm Phalanx autonomy, accepting that if neither works, the formation has no further defense against this contact. What would you do? Drop your choice, A, B, or C, in the comments. because Torres had 15 seconds left. She chose A, fire the SM-2. The second SM-2 launched at 1:48:38. Range to target, 7 nautical miles. At 7 nautical miles, the incoming missile performed a terminal maneuver, a brief climb of approximately 40 meters, followed by a steep descent toward USS Nitze's waterline. This is a known terminal guidance behavior for certain Iranian missile families, designed to defeat Phalanx engagement geometry by approaching at a steep angle rather than a flat sea-skim. The second SM-2 had been guiding on the sea-skim track. The terminal maneuver threw off its intercept solution. The SM-2 detonated on proximity fuse at 11 nautical miles. It had lost the target. The Phalanx was the only remaining defense. The incoming missile was now at 3 nautical miles, altitude 40 meters and descending. The Phalanx radar had been tracking it continuously. At 1:48:51, the Phalanx opened fire. The M61A 120mm cannon aboard the Phalanx fires at 4,500 rounds per minute. In approximately 1.9 seconds of continuous engagement, the system delivered over 140 rounds of tungsten penetrator ammunition into the incoming missile's flight path. The missile entered the round stream at 1,800 meters range from USS Nitze. It detonated. The warhead achieved partial detonation. The fusing sequence was disrupted by Phalanx penetrators entering the warhead body before arming was complete. The resulting explosion was approximately 40% of the design yield for the warhead. Even at 40%, it was not nothing. The blast and fragmentation pattern reached USS Nitze at a distance of approximately 900 meters. 2 fragments penetrated the ship's hull above the waterline near the forward equipment spaces. 1 fragment struck a radar equipment cabinet. The second fragment passed through the cabinet and embedded in a bulkhead. An electrical fire started in the cabinet. 1 sailor in the space was wounded by the electrical arc from the destroyed cabinet. Flash burns to the hands and forearms. He was conscious and did not lose consciousness during treatment. The ship was damaged. Nobody died. The Phalanx had not stopped the engagement cleanly, but it had stopped the kill. At 1:49:44, the P-3 Orion surveillance aircraft that had been climbing toward the formation reversed course and departed back toward Iranian territory. Its crew had been monitoring the radar picture. They had seen 6 missiles engaged. They had seen the Phalanx engagement. They had the data they came for. Aboard USS Shiloh, Commodore Frank Callahan, the formation commander, had been managing the engagement from the moment weapons free was authorized. The P-3's departure told him 2 things. The first wave was complete. The assessment phase had begun. He had a brief window, probably 10 to 20 minutes before the Iranian Command Authority could evaluate the first wave data and decide on a follow-on strike, to execute a counterstrike against the coastal batteries. Authorization came back at 1:52:41. Strike authorized. Both coastal battery positions. Standoff munitions only. USS Shiloh fired 4 BGM-109 Tomahawk Block 4 cruise missiles at 2:04 a.m. 2 targeted the northern battery. 2 targeted the eastern battery. At Tomahawk cruise speed, flight time to both targets, approximately 21 minutes. USS Nitze, managing its electrical fire and conducting damage assessment, held its Tomahawk fires per Callahan's call. It would contribute SM-2 coverage for the formation during the Tomahawk flight. The 4 Tomahawks arrived at 2:25 a.m. Post-strike satellite imagery assessment completed at 4:12 a.m. showed the following. The northern battery, the one that had fired the Nor missiles, had partially dispersed before the Tomahawks arrived. The launcher vehicles had moved approximately 2 kilometers north. The fire control radar, the communications shelter, and the battery's fuel and ammunition support point had not moved. All 3 were destroyed. The launchers survived. The battery was combat ineffective without its support infrastructure. The eastern battery, the source of the supersonic threats, had not dispersed at all. Imagery showed direct hits on 2 launcher vehicles, 1 fire control shelter, and a maintenance building. 3 secondary explosions were visible in the post-strike imagery, consistent with stored missile propellant igniting. The eastern battery was assessed as destroyed. 3 of 4 Tomahawk strike objectives achieved. Launcher vehicles from the northern battery had survived. It was not a perfect result, but it was the proportional and legally grounded response to a coordinated attack on U.S. warships in international waters. The P-3 Orion crew that had observed the engagement landed at their base at 3:19 a.m. Their targeting data was downloaded and analyzed. The engagement assessment they produced which was later reconstructed from signals intelligence, concluded that the Salvo had been partially effective. The supersonic battery had been destroyed by American counterstrike. The terminal engagement of USS Nitze had demonstrated Phalanx effectiveness even against a terminal maneuvering threat. The formation had maintained combat capability throughout. Their recommendation for the next operation: increase salvo size to 8 or 10 missiles and add a second aircraft with an active jammer to degrade Aegis radar performance during the terminal phase. That recommendation was filed. In the weeks that followed, 5th Fleet distributed the engagement record to every surface warfare commander in the theater. The 4-second classification delay, the manual override required for the unidentified Eastern missile type, was the central technical finding. The threat library update that would have eliminated that delay had been pending for 6 weeks before the engagement. It was distributed within 48 hours of the battle report. The electrical fire aboard USS Nitze was extinguished by damage control teams in 11 minutes. The forward equipment spaces were isolated, the radar cabinet replaced during a 3-day Bahrain port call, and the ship returned to patrol. The sailor with flash burns to his hands and forearms was treated and returned to duty in 17 days. The Strait of Hormuz is not just a shipping lane. It is the hinge point of the global energy economy and the most intensely contested maritime theater in the world. Every engagement in those waters, every SM-2 fired, every Tomahawk launched, every Phalanx burst, is a data point in an argument between two military establishments that have been studying each other for decades. Iran knows the Aegis system. It knows the SM-2's geometry requirements. It knows the Phalanx's engagement envelope. It knows that 4 seconds of classification delay on an unrecognized missile signature compresses the intercept window in ways that matter. The upgrade that fixed that delay was distributed fleet-wide. But the upgrade only covers the threats that are already in the library. The next Iranian missile that doesn't match any known profile will require another override. And on the night that override takes longer than 4 seconds, the equation changes. There is a dimension to multi-axis missile attacks that the pure technical accounting of intercepts and misses does not fully capture. The CIC crew of USS Nitze managed a 6-missile engagement, a surveillance aircraft approach, a miss and refire sequence, a Phalanx terminal engagement, an onboard electrical fire, and a damage assessment, all within approximately 4 minutes. Every one of those tasks competed for attention with every other. The fire control console operator tracking the 3rd Eastern Contact was also aware of the fire report coming from the forward equipment spaces. The tactical action officer making the SM-2 firing decision was also tracking the P-3 Orion's approach on a secondary display. Military professionals train for this kind of cognitive compression. They train for it repeatedly. But training cannot fully simulate the physiological reality of a combat engagement. The adrenaline, the sensory overload, the knowledge that every decision has immediate lethal consequences. Lieutenant Torres, who made the Option A call at 1:48:38, later said in her after-action interview that the decision felt like it took 10 seconds. The engagement recording showed it took 1.4 seconds from the SM-2 miss notification to her fire authorization. 1.4 seconds. That is the distance between training and instinct. In the formal after-action review, the engagement of the 3rd Eastern Missile Contact was classified as a tactical success. Threat was neutralized before reaching the ship. The damage to USS Nitze was classified as minor. The single casualty was classified as light wounded. In the informal conversations that happened in the wardroom of USS Nitze that night, the officers who had run the engagement talked about what had almost happened, not what did happen, what almost happened. The 3rd Eastern missile had been 14 meters from a successful Phalanx proximity kill. It had performed a terminal maneuver that defeated 2 SM-2s and nearly defeated the Phalanx. If the warhead had achieved full detonation at 900 meters, the fragment pattern would have covered the bridge, the CIC, and 2 engineering compartments. The casualty figure in that scenario is not a single sailor with flash burns. The Aegis system performed within its design parameters. The SM-2 performed within its known limitations. The Phalanx performed at the edge of its engagement envelope. Every system did what it was supposed to do, and one missile still got close enough to damage the ship. That is not a failure of the system. It is a description of the system's limits. The IRGCN analysts who designed the Salvo knew those limits. They had designed the Eastern Battery's missiles specifically to approach in conditions that would degrade the SM-2's performance. Sea skimming at very low altitude to exploit radar sea return interference, with a terminal maneuver designed to defeat the follow-on shot geometry. They had not achieved the kill they designed for, but they had validated the approach. The next salvo will be larger. The next Eastern Battery will fire 5 missiles instead of 3, with 2 in low-altitude sea skim profile, and 1 or 2 executing terminal maneuvers on randomized timings to prevent the Phalanx from optimizing its engagement geometry. That planning is ongoing. The upgrades to counter it are also ongoing. That is the nature of the contest. Stay vigilant, stay informed. See you in the next one.